Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome to another video. Today we are doing a review on a new stamping platform. Well, actually it's technically not new. We're gonna take a look at the Sizzix Stencil and Stamp tool, which came out a little while ago, but I wasn't super interested in it at first. With a lot of the stamping tools on the market, it just didn't seem like a contender that could really compete in the races for me until a new part of the tool recently came out. And this new attachment is called the Sizzix Stamp and Spin, and it hooks onto the Stamp and Stencil tool and makes it even more versatile, which really made the Stencil and Stamp tool a good contender in the races between other stamp tools for me. Now, like with every review on my channel, these products were sent to me, but I have no vested interest in giving them a positive review. I always tell every company they're gonna have to accept the positives and negatives because every tool has them, and I'll share everything that I love and don't love about the Stamp and Stencil tool so that hopefully you can decide if it's right for your crafting needs. Everyone's needs are a little bit different, so even something that I might dislike about the tool, you might really love about it. It just depends on how your crafting style works. Everything I used in today's video is going to be listed and linked down below so you can check it out, and using those links helps support me, so I really appreciate it. Without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so let's start off with the basic stencil and stamp platform. I'm gonna do a little unboxing here. All right, so inside of the box, you get the instructions. We won't be needing those. You get this little adapter, which is meant for your stenciling projects, which I'll share in just a little bit here. Then we have the actual stamp platform itself, which is really quite large here. It has this top plastic piece that you can lift off and actually comes out of that stamping platform. Then to put it back in, you place it upright back in those little grooves, and then it goes right back into place perfectly. Then underneath the stamping platform, you have your adhesive sheet. This is Sizzix Sticky Grid and will make this bottom surface of the stamping tool nice and sticky. To apply this to your surface, I peel off the back of the grid gently. Then I'll stick it right in one of the corners of the stamping tool, line it up along the edge, and then carefully place it down onto the stamp platform. Wait a minute, I did that wrong. We're gonna go back in here and peel this off. This is probably why the instructions are helpful. I thought that both sides had a grid, but the back side actually doesn't have a grid. So I'll peel off the non-gridded side and place it down onto my stencil and stamp tool. And this is why it's good to learn from me and have me make the mistakes before you do. All right, so you can see this gives you a nice grid on your surface then, right in the center of your Stamp and Stencil tool. And this is pretty nicely tacky. It's not super sticky, which you don't want it to be because you don't want it to rip your cardstock, but I am kind of wondering how long it's gonna last while we do our projects, and we'll kind of see how sticky it stays throughout the video. Now, I do also wanna mention that Sticky Grid is a consumable. It's meant to be repurchased over and over. It comes in a pack of 5 for this large sheet for $12.99, which isn't horrible, but you do have to keep that in mind once you're buying this stamping tool, that you will be consistently replacing it. I've heard that it lasts quite a bit of time, but I'm excited to test it out. And of course, in between uses, you'll want to save this backer sheet because you'll just place this right back on to that sticky sheet so that it doesn't get any dust and stays nice and sticky while we're not using it. And before we get too far into anything, I wanted to show that they also have this pink color available. This is a scrapbook.com exclusive, so if pink is your thing, definitely check this one out too. Pink isn't really my color, but I can appreciate how pretty this nice pastel pink color is. So if pink is your thing, this is a totally adorable version of the tool that you can check out as well. Wanted to share that because I know color options are kind of fun if you want for your tools. All right, so to start off my stamping, I'm gonna go in with a really fine detail image like this rose from the Butterfly Kisses stamp set. This is a clear photopolymer stamp, so they're a little bit thinner than regular red rubber stamps. And I also want to test how they work inside of this tool. So I'm going to go in with a piece of stark white cardstock and place this right on the front and center of my sticky mat. Now, something to note is there's no edge on this, which can be a good thing and can be a bad thing. As long as that sticky grid stays sticky enough to hold this cardstock, which it is, it's not moving one bit, nice and stuck down there, then it shouldn't be a problem. And what's really nice about that too, is you can put a large piece of scrapbook paper in here. So if you're a scrapbooker, this is the perfect tool for you. As a card maker myself, this is quite a large tool. As a card maker, this tool feels a little bit large for me, but it also might be nice if you're doing like a 5x7 card. It's definitely less limiting for sure. So I'll take this rose image. I'm going to place it kind of on the corner coming onto the cardstock like this. And then I'll pick it up with the hinge. And now there's two sides to this lid. One feels sort of textured and one doesn't have any texture on it. I don't know if it makes a difference, but I'm using the sort of textured side right now and it seems to be sticking pretty well to it. Now the other thing about this stamping tool is it does seem quite large. I have a big desk, but when you open this up fully, it's quite a big space. So if you've got a smaller desk, one fix that I've seen for that I've seen a lot of makers doing, which also kind of stabilizes the platform a little bit more while you're inking up, is just taking that hinge out and laying it on top of your project like this. Then I'll go in with a black ink Here I'm going to use a little bit of VersaFine Clear Nocturne ink, and we'll ink up this image really easily. And yeah, this makes it nice and sturdy so you can really ink this up well. Then all I need to do is take this right back into the hinge there, place it in, and stamp it down. And we'll lift it up. Now if you want to, you could totally just leave it in the hinges if that's easier for you and ink it up like this. It's a little bit less sturdy, but it still totally works. And I wanted to show that too, because I know that this mechanism makes it really easy to just flip it over and continuously stamp. So if you have a desk big enough, that's probably the easiest way to do it. That's stamped in the exact same spot. Some stamping tools stamp off just a little bit and make the image a lot thicker, but this one did a great job at stamping in the same spot. So definitely points for the stencil and stamp tool there. And then I'll grab a butterfly image from my stamp set, and we'll just place that flying alongside that flower. Now for this one, I want to test what the non-etched side feels like. So I'll just flip this over. It locks in there perfectly, and this side's completely smooth. So let's see how that stamps, if there's any difference to it. I'm wondering if there's a difference to either side. So in these reviews, I really like to just kind of test it along with you so you can see what my findings are in real time and how easy it is to use. So I'll ink that up, and then we'll stamp this right down. Perfect, that's stamped really crisp. Okay, I'm thinking that this smooth side is the one to use because this stamp stuck down a lot better. It peels off a little bit more difficult, so it seems to cling better to this side, but both sides did work for me. I just had better results on this smoother side. And then I'll use the sentiment that says fluttering by to say hi. And I wanna see how this lines up. So one thing I love about stamping tools in the past is I can really look over the top and use these grid lines to line the sentiments up quite easily. This I can do the same. I sort of wish the grid lines were a little bit smaller on this tool because it would make it so you can line it up more precisely, and then I'll just stamp that down perfectly. And that works well. It's stamped really nicely for that sentiment. And there is that finished card background that we've stamped with a couple images. Really easy to line everything up. Everything stamped well that first time beautifully. And if I needed to, I can restamp it in the exact same spot with no errors, which I thought was awesome. This mechanism right here seems to have no wiggle to it at all. It's really tight in there, which allows you to get perfect stamping like that. All right, now to remove this off the sticky grid, let's see how sticky it really is. It seems to be quite sticky actually. So I'm gonna go in here with a little tweezers to get at least the corner out, and then we'll be able to peel it off. And you can see it comes off nice and easily. It's a lot stickier than I actually expected it to be when cardstock is stuck down to it. So that was holding it really nicely in place. I'm kind of impressed actually, because to the touch of your fingers, it does not feel that sticky, but it really clings onto that cardstock and holds it nicely. Now I do want to see how stamping cleans off of it, so I'm gonna go in here with a little bit of water, and we'll just wipe that off with a paper towel. Oh, okay, water really seeps into that, so it just kind of sunk in instead of being able to wipe off quickly. And that ink isn't moving anywhere. It's not like lifting back off on my finger, which is nice, but it kind of just sinks into this. So it's definitely gonna get messy as you're working with your projects, which isn't a huge deal. Like I said, you're gonna replace it after a certain amount of projects. It's not my favorite thing because I'm a little bit picky on how things look while I'm crafting, but it is a tool and your tools are gonna get used and messy, and that's totally okay. I just wish there was some sort of coating on top of this that made it a little bit easier to clean off, but hey. Okay, so definitely don't spray a ton of water on this. It's kind of like ruining the sticky grid a little bit there. All right, now one thing that also seems kind of fun about the stamping tool and a little bit unique is you can place your cardstock right in the center down on your sticky grid again. And here we're gonna try red rubber stamps using the Floral Borders stamp from my Simon Hurley Create set. I love this one because you have a bunch of different floral borders to choose from. I'm gonna use these kind of leaves that are nice and bold here. And these are cling-mounted red rubber background stamps, so they're quite a bit thicker than the clear stamps in here, so we can see how they work out. Now I'm gonna place this right on the center there, and we'll pick it up with the top lid of our stamping tool. You'll notice that that red rubber stamp is going to hit on this side first, and then you'll just give it more pressure and it'll hit on the other side as well. It might put a little bit of flex on this area, but I've been told that the red rubber stamps should work in here, so we're gonna try it out. Starting off, let's stamp it down using a little bit of Love Struck, which is this nice sort of berry red color. And then we can stamp it right onto our stark white cardstock. All right, and that stamps pretty nicely. I'm gonna go in one more time just to get a more bold and solid color. All right, that looks great. And it didn't make it any darker at this side than this side. Even though that's the side that hit the cardstock first and you're giving it more pressure, it didn't seem to affect the stamping at all, which is great. And now what I thought was really cool about this mechanism here is if you take it out, you can actually move it up or down on these little grooves. So we'll move it down just by one groove here and we'll see where that lines up. It's gonna overlap a little bit with the last one, but that's good. It'll fill in the next area. So again, we'll go in and ink this up. This time I'm using this bright orange guppy color. Again, we'll place it in that second groove there and stamp it down. right, then I'll go in with a little bit of shooting star for this last one. And this time we're gonna move it 2 down, lock it in, and stamp it down. And then of course, we can go upwards too. So here I'm gonna go in using a little bit of Prom Queen as my next color. And this is where we started. And instead of moving it down, I'm gonna move it 1 upwards, and this will stamp above that red area. Check that out. And then we'll do it one last time using a little bit of Crown Me, which is this gorgeous deep purple color. And here I'm gonna move it up twice, and that should stamp right above that pink area. Perfect. Okay, I am obsessed with how this background turned out. I haven't seen many stamp tools where you can move it up and down like that. I know there are a lot that you can rotate it with, but that's kind of a unique feature of the stencil and stamp tool that I thought was really cool. You could do it with little sentiments going across your card and moving them up and down in a bunch of different colors, but I thought just like a background strip like this that you can stamp in several different ways is really cool. And with all of our peel apart background stamps, there are lots that just have little strips in them that you could do this sort of background with, which I think is amazing. I'm gonna go in again. I've been struggling to just peel it off with my fingers, so you know this thing is kind of sticky. I'm gonna go in with my tweezers and then slowly peel it off. Now, even though it's nice and tacky, it's not sticky enough to rip my stark white cardstock, so I am appreciative of that, so I think they did a good job at doing just the right amount of stick. And how stunning is that background? I absolutely love it and can't wait to put this on a card. Okay, now earlier I put too much water and kind of let it sit. Now when it comes to this ink, I want to see if I can get a little bit of off. And again, I'm doing this so you don't have to, so if you get this tool, you don't ruin it like me, but I just want to test it out for you guys. So let me see, if I spray down a little bit of water, can I go in immediately and wipe it off? Yes, it looks like it removes a little bit of the ink, but I don't know if it's even worth spraying it down. I don't think it lost any of its stick in that area, but it didn't pull off enough of the ink for it to really be worth it to clean it off. I would almost just rather have the ink just kind of sit there and not put any water, and that way you're not even risking ruining it whatsoever with the water sinking into it. If I had to compare this sticky mat to something, I would definitely compare it to a Post-it note, where it's still kind of very similar to a cardstock. So if you apply water to it, it's definitely going to soak in and you're going to see kind of a water spot there. And in some area where I applied even too much water, it started sort of peeling off the sticky coating. So I'd recommend pretty much no water when you're using the sticky grid. You don't necessarily need to clean stuff up because it's not going to come off in your hands because, like I said, it's that paper, so it's just going to kind of soak into there. So as long as you're fine with your work surface looking just a little bit messy as you're working, which isn't a huge issue, you're totally good with the sticky grid. It's new to me though, because a lot of the mats that I use, like that photopolymer coated mat or some of the other sticky mats, are more of a plasticky type material or that photopolymer, so you can easily wipe them off the surface and they barely stain. So it's just like pros and cons of different surfaces that you're working on. All right, now I'm done kind of showing the basic stamping aspect of this tool. You know, you can use clear and rubber stamps, and you know how well the alignment is with stamping in the exact same spot, which I think are the most important parts of a stamping tool. Now I want to talk about the stencil capabilities of this stencil and stamp tool, because that's a big part of it, and I'm excited to share my thoughts on it. So like I said, this teal adapter came inside of the stencil and stamp tool. These little notches here that are on your tool are actually just meant for storing this. So if you want to store this inside of your stencil and stamp tool, you'll just hook it on like that, put your lid on, and you're perfectly good to go. So those aren't to lock it on or anything like that. These markings are actually to place it inside of these grooves, and then you're ready to use your stencils. And it has all these different markings so that if you want it to reach down further for your project, you can just move it down further, or if you want to use it more up towards the top, you can just line it up more towards the top of that tool. I don't necessarily know why that's super important, but it's just giving you the versatility there to move it up or down. Now here's where the interesting part comes in. All of these Sizzix stencils, and they have quite a few of them, actually have holes on the top of the stencil that lines up with their tool specifically. So let's go in and do this butterfly stencil, because I think that's just beautiful. So you can see with this stencil, it comes with 4 pieces, and then you can see that these holes on top are going to align each one of these layering stencils in the exact same spot on your platform. So these are 6x6 stencils, so I'm going in with a piece of 6x6 stark white cardstock. And now the only thing I'm kind of confused about is knowing where exactly to line it up on your mat here. It's kind of a little bit confusing. I almost wish they had this where you can only put it on one section, so that they have like a 6x6 area on here that you know it's gonna line up. But what I'm gonna do is there's actually etched squares to line up your cardstock on the stencil. So I'm going to place my cardstock on the stencil. Then I know where it's going to line up. I'll put it into these holes, and then I can place my cardstock right down onto the sticky mat. That isn't the most seamless process, so I wish that's something they would think of, because I like to have pre-cut cardstock so that I'm wasting less cardstock. I've seen a lot of demonstrations where someone will take a full sheet of cardstock and place it down and then stencil on it and cut it down, but then you're wasting a lot more than you would if you just cut the cardstock beforehand and then stenciled with it. Some sort of marking on this mat would be really helpful. All right, then let's go in with the first layer of the stencil here. We'll place it right into these holes and it pops into place quite tight. And then we'll sort of place that into the sticky grid as well and hope that it sticks. I'm gonna be honest, this stencil does worry me slightly with all these little pieces that hang off of it. When we design stencils, we try not to do that as much, just so that it's a little bit easier for you when you're blending. But I'm gonna go in with blending brushes and my ink pads in hopes that the blending brushes are a little bit softer on these areas than a blending foam would be. So I'll pick up my ink here and start blending onto the surface. I'm using this large Ultimate blending brush, which I really like because it makes inking super easy to cover a large surface area. And when you get down to these areas that aren't attached, all you want to do is just blend in the same direction as those pieces. Because if you start moving up and down, it's going to kind of move them more if you're not super gentle. So just be sure to kind of blend in the direction that any loose pieces are. And you can be a little bit more rough in the areas where there's nothing loose. Then I'll bring in a little bit of guppy and some orange too. You guys know me, I can't help myself when it comes to shading. And I'll just blend on a little bit of that light orange ink too, to add a little bit more depth and dimension to some of these areas in the stencil. All right, then we'll lift the stencil up, unhook it, and we've got our first layer completely done. I do have to say, I love that their focal point images also have kind of this background to it that you blend out. I think that's pretty cool. Then I'll go in with the second layer, which is the large solid butterfly. We'll lock it into place and then sort of tack it into that sticky mat just a little bit. The sticky mat doesn't seem to hold it much, so you're really relying on these hooks up here, which seem to lock in place pretty easily. For this solid layer, I want a really light color, so I'm gonna go in with this light pink, which is called Piggyback. It's a super pastel pink color, but I think it's gonna work well for this bottom layer of the butterfly. So we'll just blend it in all over using my domed foam blending tool. And that blends out pretty easily and gives us a nice, light, and beautiful pink color. All right, then we'll lift this off and unhook it. The third layer of the stenciling, which gives the butterfly a little bit more detail. For this area, I'm gonna go in with some Rosy Cheeks ink on my domed foam blending tool and just blend this into place. Now again, there's some areas that aren't really hooked onto anything, so just be careful. If you need to, in those areas, kind of dab instead of blending, and just be nice and delicate with those unattached pieces. All right, then we'll lift this off. You can see in that area where it was unattached and kind of wiggling a little bit, it didn't give us a nice solid and crisp line there. So sometimes those areas will kind of feather out as it's moving a little bit, which isn't super ideal. And then we have the fourth layer, which is the last layer of the stencil. I'm too afraid to add lunar paste because there's so many kind of things that are just sticking up on these stencils. So for this, I'll just go in with my darkest pink color called Prom Queen. And I'm just going to blend this on top to give those last finishing details. And again, in those areas where it's not attached, just do more of a dabbing motion. All right, so we'll dab that through, and then we can lift this off. And that is beautiful. I love how it looks. Again, slightly feathered there where it wasn't super attached. I do have to say those loose ends kind of aggravate me a little bit. I know that it looks beautiful in the end and it gives you a great result, but as you're designing stencils, you really have to think about how it's gonna be for the end consumer. We do it a lot as we design stencils. I know the pain that you want something because it looks beautiful, but it might not be super functional. I'd rather have function over the look and have some of those pieces be more attached on areas. So if I had to complain about the stenciling experience, that would be really my only complaint, is that the stencil design itself was a little bit more fragile because of those areas. But the actual experience with the knobs on this tool are really quite good. It lined it up perfectly in place and it gave us a beautiful blended background. We'll peel this off. That tool is still keeping pretty nice and stuck. And I love how that looks once it's all completely blended out. It's absolutely gorgeous and it makes a really quick and simple card with the background and the focal point on one stencil. But now this is where I give the bad news, because I really only like that stenciling if you're going to use it with the Sizzix branded stencils. So if you're investing in this tool and you want stencils to go along with it, of course you can buy those Sizzix stencils, but you are limited by just their designs. Because if you want to use anybody else's branded stencils, you're going to have to buy these universal stencil converters, which come in a pack of 10. Now personally, I don't think this is a great idea, and I'll show you why. So inside of this package, you get 10 of these little plastic pieces that have the 2 holes on the top and this little adhesive strip area. So all you do is peel the adhesive back, and then you can take any one of your stencils and line it up. So here I'm going to use my Happy Heart stencil from Simon Hurley Create, and I'm just going to place this right at the top of that stencil and line it up. We'll press it down into place, and then you have this little adapter on it. Now, I wish the adhesive went all the way across. I think it's kind of weird that these areas are sticking up here. And also it covers up a little bit of that heart design, which isn't a huge deal, I guess. But then with layering stencils, how do you know if you're going to get the stencil in the exact same spot? You really don't. You have to take this stencil then and line this up exactly with that stencil below it. And then you'll peel that off and you have to place it in the exact same spot, lining it up with the stencil below it. Now, that's all aligned and now it's gonna work great. So again, we can lay our piece of cardstock down. I'm gonna place it right there and kind of guess that that's where it's gonna be. And then we'll line these up right into the knobs there and lay our stencil down. For the first layer, I'll go in using a little bit of Prom Queen ink, and I'm going to blend this across the whole surface. And then I'll fade it out to white, and you can see my inks blend and fade really beautifully on my stark white cardstock. Then we can lift this stencil right off. And then I'll do the same thing with the second stencil, and since we had them lined on top of each other when we put these adapters on, it should sort of fit into place. All right, and then for the second layer, I'll go in here and line this up. Place it down and it sticks nice and good. And then for this layer, I'm gonna go in with a little bit of red bee sting on my blending tool and we'll blend it across the surface again. And again, we'll fade it out into white as we go across the surface. Really easy to do there. Peel this right off. And there we go. A nice and lined up stenciled background. And I love how it turned out. So we'll peel this right off and check that out. I love this stencil background. It lined up perfectly since we laid those adapters right on top of each other and made sure they were nice and aligned, and then your stencil looks great too. Now I do want to say, do I think the stencil adapters work? Yes. So if you love a system like this, or if you're making a lot of cards at once and you're planning on using that stencil a lot of times with that adapter on, it might be a great method and solution for you. And I love that they did include that in case if you are using stencils of other brands, because lots of companies sell amazing stencils. But when it comes to time and money investment, I think time is huge on this one. It takes you maybe longer to line up those adapters, peel them off and make sure they're in the exact same spot than it would be to just tape down your stencil. And it's also not as secure if you're using something like lunar paste. I'd probably prefer to do that with a taped off stencil. So in that case, if I'm just using the stencil once, or it's not a Sizzix stencil and doesn't have the adapter, I don't know if I'm going to be using those and adding those to my stencils. I just don't think it's worth the time and money investment, but that's my opinion. And if you love a system, this might be a great solution for you, and I'm glad they included it. All right, moving on, let's talk about the new Sizzix Stamp and Spin tool. And this is what I am most excited about and what I think is really making this tool extra versatile for your crafting. And I wonder why my craft room gets so messy so quickly. All right, so here is what the Stamp and Spin add-on looks like. This is $40, and it's a really heavy, robust stamping platform. It feels like really great quality and really sturdy, which I really like. So this locks up here into the stamping platform. It's got a solid piece of plastic up here, and the stamping and spinning mechanism is right here at the end. And so it spins and will lock into place for you to rotate your stamping and create wreath designs and unique pattern papers. Now again, one thing that I really wish that Sizzix did is had some sort of card markings right in the center, maybe A2 and a couple other sizes as well. That way you can lay this down and know that it's exactly centered. For me, I'm going to place down my piece of cardstock right here, and then I'm gonna go in with a permanent marker and mark around my cardstock just so that I know where the center of the sticky grid is. When you're creating wreaths and designs on your piece of cardstock, I like to know exactly where the center is so that if I want to, I can line my wreath up directly in the center of the card. Because if you have it off at all, it'll make the wreath look off on your card. Like I said, most of the people that I've seen demonstrating this start off with a piece of large cardstock and cut it down to the size they want, which I don't love because it creates a lot of waste. I'd rather get 4 sheets of cardstock out of one 8.5 by 11 sheet. And so to make sure it's perfect, I've included my own lines here so that I know how to easily center this right in front and center. So I'm placing a piece of cardstock down right into those lines and making sure it's nice and adhered. And then I thought I'd use images from the Wings and Things background stamp. And what I love so much about this background stamp is lots of the butterflies and bugs from it peel out. So I'm going to use these to create a nice wreath design across my card. So I'm gonna lift this right out of here to show you how I'm gonna use it. So there are all of these radial markings that you can see on here, and I'm going to use these to my advantage as I'm creating. I'm going to place my image right inside of that grouping. And as long as it's inside that area, that's how you know it's going to stamp well without overlapping into the next sections that you have here. If it overlaps these lines a little bit and goes outside of that area, that's okay too. You might just do less rotations of the stamp to fill in the wreath nicely. So let's do a fun rainbow of color. I'm gonna start off with a little bit of Love Struck ink this up, then we'll lock it into place and stamp it down. All right, that stamps down well, but it's important for me to see if this is going to stamp in the exact same spot. So I'm going to ink it up again with that same Love Struck ink and stamp it down onto our cardstock. And that stamps down in the exact same spot, which is perfect. For the rest of this demo, I'm gonna flip it on its side like this, but I hope it's still easy to understand. It's just a lot easier to fit in the camera frame. So when we're doing our rotations, all you need to do is rotate this middle part of that stamp and spin. You can see it starting to spin there, and you'll really feel it click into place. Did you see that large click that it did? That's how you know you're at the next area. Now, because we have it inside of this radial line, we can stamp the next image right here. But if your image is bigger and goes over, you might want to rotate it twice to stamp it further away from that area. It just depends on what you're stamping, but again, this image is small enough that I can stamp it twice. Here I'm gonna use a little bit of pink, which is this gorgeous prom queen color, and I'll stamp that right down into place. And spin it really easily until it clicks. You can see it's in that next area. We'll ink it up using a little bit of that bright guppy ink pad, and we'll stamp it right down into place. And I like how heavy this is. It really makes it easy that it just kind of plops down there and almost stamps for itself. And then you can apply a little bit of pressure and you've got a beautiful stamped impression. Then we'll rotate it one more time and stamp with Shooting Star bright yellow ink. Next, we'll go in with this bright green, which is called Overzealous. I love this green color. We'll stamp that down. And again, if you need to, you can always stamp it twice. And by the way, when I'm stamping, I'm grabbing from these handles on the edge. I have been told that if you grab from this center section, you might shift it just a little bit, and then it might not align perfectly. So when I'm grabbing, I always grab from one of these two handles on either side, and it's nice and sturdy. We'll stamp using a little bit of Tropical Tango. Then we'll stamp using a little bit of this great blue No Diving ink. It's so gorgeous. We'll stamp it down. And then last but not least, we'll shift it one last time. And we're at the last area and we'll stamp it down using some Crown Me purple ink. And that fills that area in so beautifully. And now you have a gorgeous stamped rainbow of these butterflies. I absolutely adore that design. And it's stamped around perfectly in a circle and was really easy to use with that clicking, rotating mechanism. All right, now to complete the design a little bit more, let's add one of these adorable dragonflies kind of in the mix here. Instead of lining it up with that radial area, because I've already started the wreath, I can then just move on to lining it up kind of in between these butterflies and filling in the area nicely. So I'll pick that up with my stamp and spin, and then I can stamp it down in the exact same colors, which is going to offset it a little bit and give us a beautiful finished design. We'll stamp that down. Then again, let's rotate this. We will rotate until it clicks, and you can see it fills the rest of that design in. Then I'll bring in Prom Queen, and we can just continue stamping and rotating until it fills the design in completely. It's really super easy to do. It's a great process, and it's kind of fun and therapeutic because it makes it so easy. There's not really much thought that needs to go into building a beautiful wreath when it's clicking and doing all of that easy turning for you. And now the cool part is we can also mix in clear stamps without having to change anything about what we're doing. So I'm gonna go in with this Friendship Floral set, mainly because I just want a little heart. And I like this heart that's down here to kind of fill in this wreath pattern. And we can just place that in between the dragonfly and the butterfly. Pick it up, and it works perfectly with clear stamps too, like this. And then I'll go in and start my stamping. And we'll just stamp in the exact same way as we did with the rubber stamps. And it works perfectly with the clear photopolymer too. I really like that you don't have to really change anything and you can keep working with different types of stamps in here. It makes it really easy and versatile because you can mix and match not only different stamp sets, but also different types of stamps, which is game changing. All right, then I'll peel that off the sticky mat and check out that beautiful design that we created with the different images. So of course you could do this with any images in your collection, but I love that we used the butterflies and dragonflies. Them in this wreath pattern makes it look like they're kind of flying all around the card, which is so much fun and makes such a beautiful background. Now all I need to do is put a sentiment in the center and you've got a really great card. So for the sentiment, I'll just line it right back up in the center and I'll replace it with this solid piece of acrylic. And for this card, I'm gonna stick with the Friendship Florals stamp set. I love the sentiment that says life is better with a friend like you, and just how bold it is. It fills in that space really nicely in the center there. And then again, we can look through the lid to make sure that our sentiment's lined up. That looks good. And then we can pick it up. And we can stamp that down with some VersaFine Clear. And that's gonna give us a nice, dark black, crisp impression for our sentiment. And then let's peel this off of that sticky mat. And check that out with the sentiment. It's absolutely stunning. You just put this on a card and it's all completed. So beautiful. And I love how that rainbow wreath of critters turned out. So now let's talk about this sticky mat. It definitely got a little bit less sticky as we went throughout. You can see that last piece of cardstock that I peeled off was a little bit easier to peel off, but nothing was popping off of the surface and coming undone from the sticky mat. So it definitely held up better than I was expecting it to. But you are gonna have to replace these mats and they're meant to be replaced. So keep that in mind when you're buying, that is part of the investment. They're going to have to change these out. They easily peel off and can be replaced quite easily. When it comes to cleaning this mat off from mediums like ink and things like that, you saw what happened when I used water over here. It basically kind of removed the stick in that area. So I wouldn't even use water at all. I would just leave the mat looking messy like this because trying to clean it is going to make it work less well for you. I think the sticky mat works for the intention of the stamp platform. I would use it for stamping and stenciling, but I wouldn't throw a lot of mediums at it. So don't throw a lot of wet mediums at it or like lunar paste or things like that. I probably would do that off of this mat because I really want to clean those and this doesn't clean super well. For mixed media, I like more of a photopolymer mat or a craft sheet, which I'm sure you could also put a craft sheet down over top of this surface or one of those like grippy silicone thin mats, and that would clean off a little bit better too. So there are some kind of hacks I feel like that you could get around using this mat if you're not a huge fan of it on top of the stamping platform. That's just personal preference though, because I throw a lot of mediums at my surfaces and expect them to clean off really nicely. So this was a little bit underwhelming in that aspect, but was still great for being sticky and stamping and stenciling. As for the stencil and stamp tool by itself, I think it's a good stamp platform. Do I think it's better than any other stamp platform on the market? I don't think that it's better by itself, but I do like how solid those hinges are and that they aren't moving anywhere. That's hard to find in a stamp platform, to get it to stamp exactly in the same spot every single time, and it did a really great job at that. I also love the fact that you can shift it on those different areas of the grooves and stamp your design kind of laterally down your card to create a really unique look. I haven't seen that done in many stamp platforms. The stenciling is just an added bonus, especially if you like to have the Sizzix Stencils. That's a really great system that they included. It does feel like a little bit of a gimmick when you're attaching them to other brand stencils, but that's just my opinion. If you love a system and you think this might work for you, it might be a great option. But I do like that they included it at least for their stencils because it adds some versatility to the stamp and stencil platform for sure. Where this platform really shines is with that new stamp and spin tool. And that's what really impressed me and what made me do this review in the first place. Because like I said, overall, as a stamp tool by itself, I don't think that it really beats anything else, but when you add that stamp and spin tool, it really adds so much versatility to the tool and the possibilities are a lot more. With that attachment added, it's a similar price point to some of the other wreath builders on the market, and I think that it does a great job at it. It's very intuitive, the way that it spins around and kind of clicks in place. It feels super solid when you're stamping, and I think it does a great job at building these wreaths. I didn't do everything that the stamp and spin tool can do in this video, but I've also heard you can create like pattern paper with it by just rotating it 4 times and doing less spins. So I think that tool adds a lot of possibilities to your stamp platform and makes this a lot more exciting, and I think definitely more worth it for sure. But this is where I really leave it up to you. Hopefully by sharing all the pros and cons in today's video, you can decide if it's right for your crafting or not. Like I said, every crafter is completely different, and maybe some of the things that I didn't like about this tool, you're going to absolutely love. And maybe some of the things I did like, you might hate. But that's the fun about crafting, is that we're all different in our needs for tools, and this one might serve your purpose completely, and you might be so excited about it. And so that's why I love to share kind of different options on my channel for different stamping platforms and different tools, so you can make an informed decision on what's best for you. If you are interested in the stamping platform and the stamp and spin tool, I'll leave links down below to everything that I use in today's video so you can check it out. And remember, using those links helps support me, so I really appreciate it. Leave me comments down below letting me know what you think of this tool, and let's start some conversations down there in the comments. And without further ado, I'll see you soon for another card making and crafting video. Have a great day. Bye.